Drifting Too Far from the Shore, Part 2. A nomad is a member of a group of people who move from one place to another rather than settling down in one location. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Vote no on the budget, they cried. Let's wait for the state to decide. For as long as a decision will take, further derision it may make. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. The word went out quietly to a few on TV, and to the newspapers they spewed. Not many votes the request did brew. The votes against the last budget were few. When they lost, they said, "We always knew." The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Very similar reasoning as in the past, where this group finished up last. Many tears after the election may have been parting. The walls of one house may have been smarting. Reason given, too many political parties were starting. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Some were once members of the minority party. For some reason they left rather smartly. A difference of opinion with leaders they may have had. Joined the independent party, they were not sad. For a while they were all very happy and glad. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Drifting too far from the shore. You may be drifting too far from the shore. Support the town needs today. Let them show you the way. Nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. With the independent party they ran for the good. They won the election, as many seats as they could. Formed an alliance with the minority party, it seems. As a de facto majority, they were a dangerous team. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. As a selectman majority, they seem very terse. They pontificated word, chapter, and verse. Their conduct could not have been worse. The voters began to look for the hearse. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. From the independent party they finally withdrew, and later formed the Winchester party with the same few. They allied with some green extremists from the east side of the lake. They did not care for the major developers or their stake. The next election they thought they would easily take. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. When they left, the independent party was not very happy. They fought the nomads on TV and were very snappy. They called them Benedict Arnolds and other such tack. Another group for the election they'd back. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Drifting too far from the shore. You may be drifting too far from the shore. Support the town needs today. Let them show you the way. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. But their platform was extremely weak. A huge tax increase bond at its peak. A respite from development did reek. They lost every seat they did seek. Their views would have raised taxes a lot. Vote in their favor, the voters would not. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. It was the biggest loss in a long time. The businessmen really left them behind. They said, how can we get back our stake? A third informed organization they would make. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Apolitical, they said, was their mission. A request to attend was refused without contrition. Their intention was known all along, it would seem. Minority supporters behind a smoke screen. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Yes, apolitical it was purported to be, but apples don't fall far from the tree. Back to the minority party some of them ran in an attempt to form a much stronger band. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Drifting too far from the shore. You may be drifting too far from the shore. Support the town needs today. Let them show you the way. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Every advancement the majority sought, the nomads with help from the minority publicly fought. The majority continued to meet their promises, they continued to keep. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Another election will be coming up soon, while the minority remains marooned. We are waiting to see who will run. Will their platform let in some sun? The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Against the much-needed developments they sing, the same for senior citizen adequate housing. They do like the POCD, if it's the way they want it to be. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Volunteerism's dead, so they say, or at least their signs have portrayed. They don't say they once placed on each commission members that espouse their unbalanced position. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Drifting too far from the shore. You may be drifting too far from the shore. Support the town needs today. Let them show you the way. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Once we have a look at who their candidates are, we'll have an opportunity to judge from afar. Let's hope that they finally come through with what the majority of the town wants them to do. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. A rumor. A minority selectman wants to be mayor. To the town and the regional school, that wouldn't be fair. The town or school should receive undivided attention, as reputed problems in each may need more prevention. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. They screech, the businessmen are a gang of five, for doing things to keep our economy alive. They continue to discredit their success. In my view, this is not acting the best. The businessmen will keep their head and make very difficult decisions in your stead. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. I took a trip down to town hall to research the affiliations all. They have been joining the minority crew, from which some long ago flew. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Drifting too far from the shore. You may be drifting too far from the shore. Support the town needs today. Let them show you the way. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. There may be differences of opinion here, Between the new and old members, some fear, like oil and water, they probably mix. That tension will be hard to fix. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Look forward to another internal coup as soon as they do what they want to do. Now what an interesting thing to pursue. The group from which some originally withdrew. If we only knew. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. They'll probably act in much the same way, try to keep the developments at bay. The revenue doesn't seem to mean much to them. They'd rather have more existing taxpayer money to spend. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. They say they're not one of the boys. Guess not, as they make too much noise. They don't want more senior citizen homes. On this issue they are as cold as the stones. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Drifting too far from the shore. You may be drifting too far from the shore. Support the town needs today. Let them show you the way. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. The more the minority feign, the businessmen continue to gain. The educators, now there are two, will do what they most often do. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Drifting too far from the shore. You may be drifting too far from the shore. Support the town needs today. Let them show you the way. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. The nomads may be drifting too far from the shore. Yep, that's the nomads drifting too far from the shore. That's a little bit of Winsted history for you over the last few years from the view of Brian O'Haron. I'm sure that not all will agree with my view, but that's my view. Well, for comments tonight, June 17th, 2009, November 3rd, the local elections are coming up in 4.5 more months or so. And the candidates for elective offices will be nominated by July 28th. They must be nominated by July 28th for the major parties, and September 2nd, 2009 for minor parties and petitioners. I will begin to discuss a bit of the recent election history and the pros and cons of each party's accomplishments, platforms, and candidates. And I will continue this until the election in November, if possible. Unlike others in the community, I do not speak for the whole town or any political party or individual. I do have a philosophy that I have expressed on this program for almost 2 years now. My approach will continue to foster the election of seasoned business people with strong business backgrounds to manage our business, the town of Winchester. The business of the town of Winchester, including our largest expense, the school system, which is about 65% or so of our budget, is very important to us. Therefore, that subject may get more attention than I have given it in the past. Last year, I concentrated, almost up to now, mostly on the selectmen. Up until the election, I'll probably do 50-50 because I want to give the Board of Education more attention than I have in the past on this program. It has been my philosophy that the selectmen are the most important, of course. But the biggest part of the budget goes to the education, and we need some help with the test scores and with the business problems we have getting the money to run our schools. I will continue to foster candidates from any organization, as I've always said in the past, or political party whose platform includes a major increase, and I mean a major increase, in additional revenue and responsible management of the taxpayers' hard-earned money. This approach requires additional profitable taxpayers and the associated profitable revenue to assist the existing taxpayers shoulder the heavy wants and needs and restoration burden left to us by ourselves and our predecessors, and exacerbated by the present and near future economic problems. As stated in my disclaimer, and I really want people to listen to this, so I'm going to keep that disclaimer up until November. I respect educators immensely. I've been around a lot of educators in my life, but believe that because of their background, they should stick to the education of the children in our school system and should not give them half-hearted attention. It should be their first priority, and that's where they should dedicate all their time. The education disclaimer will be posted on this program, as I said, until the election in November, because I do not want anybody to mistakenly think that we don't like educators and respect educators. We do. But we don't want them operating on us when we have a heart problem. Unless, of course, they're doctors or professors at medical universities. I believe that the major problems in the schools, after looking at it for almost 5 years, and the town are of a business nature. Business problems are what we have in this town, and are best resolved for the foreseeable future by seasoned, experienced businessmen and women, not seasoned, experienced educators. Of course, there are also some education problems in the schools, such as substandard test scores in some areas, inadequate curriculums, etc. I believe that those challenges are best managed by professional educators, their staffs, and their expert consultants that we keep seeing in these education meetings around Connecticut. Now is not the time, in my opinion, to construct major revenue and expense plans for the town for the state, and perhaps for your own family. Now is the time to pull together to keep our major taxpayers in town, the ones that we have here now, and some of them are leaving, and to attract new, large, and I mean large, profitable taxpayers. And I mean profitable. If they are taxpayers that have more wants than they pay in their taxes, then that's not profitable. There has to be a balance, of course, across town, and that's up to the EDC to make sure that we do have a balance in that area and that we don't attract too many people that cost the town a lot of money but don't bring in much revenue. And don't forget, we have a lot of organizations in town that pay no taxes whatsoever. Government buildings, the tax-free companies and that kind of thing, churches, all kinds of things. I'm not against those, but the more of those you have, the more you need to balance that with large taxpayers of one sort or another. That's usually businesses, manufacturing, large retail operations like our shopping center. That's the #1 taxpayer in this community and the least absorbent of any of our resources. And some of these huge homes that are going up that are in the $5 million category. The $100,000 homes, they don't help us too much. If they have 1 or 2 kids, they either lose money or break even on them. So that's not the answer. Now, we need to we need these major taxpayers in town, and to help attract new, large, profitable taxpayers to help balance our budgets without undue pressure on existing taxpayers or their businesses. This program, Planning for Success, was intended to be here for 2 years, which will be at election time. The program will continue to help you get on board for the next election. And I will continue to recommend people to you that you can vote for as helpful candidates at the next election. You, of course, are up. It's your business who you vote for. I just want to try to give you as much information as I can from my past experience to help you make up your mind. I hope this information that I'm going to give you over the next 4.5 months will help. If not, I'll have tried my best. Let's hope that you each do the same over the next 4.5 months. The agenda for tonight: made my comments. Upwards pressure on the 2008-2009 budget. Upwards pressure on the 2009-2010 budget. And upwards pressure on the 2010-2011 budget. Now, we normally wouldn't be going over 3 years, but because we have this economy problem around the world, in America, and in Connecticut, and in our own town, and in our own families, I'm trying to give you an idea of what's coming down the pike here. And remember, I always say that an engineer on a train always has to look down the tracks way in advance in front of him. Nowadays he has other things to help him do that. But you have to look down the tracks, see if there's any cows on the tracks. And then hopefully you look down the track and you see the cow in time to put on your brakes and not hit the cow and crash your train. So this is our attempt to look down the tracks to see what's coming and how it's likely to affect our town and our family. Then I will talk some great news this week about the town. Pearson OCR progress is wonderful this week. Selectmen meeting had some great major progress this week. And it was a well-run meeting, and it was very professional. I sat through part of it myself, and was very impressed by the meeting. Some November election information
if I get time, I'll also be going through some of that. So, number one, upwards pressure for this year, the budget year that ends the end of June, July 1st. As you all know from watching the select meetings, watching this program, and other things, we had a tough budget this year, and had a zero increase. We had 6 referendums to get there, and then we had the recession come down upon the world. So we have some things there that I wanted to address tonight on this program. And there are several factors that may affect this year's budget. There are no absolutes here. Remember, budgeting is managed by objectives and exception, and you always have to keep striving to achieve balance. We have less revenue than projected because of the recession. I talked to one businessman today who said his restaurant is empty at lunch during the week and has been for quite a while. There are several people I know that have not been called back for construction work yet. There are people being laid off around the town. There are people being cut back. And we have that in our own town and in our school system. So it's hit us pretty hard. But we are getting less revenue than planned. So revenue is down. And we have greater expenses than planned. We're over budget in some areas, and some of that we knew was going to happen, and some we didn't. We still have a problem this year with the police overtime, and there's a plan there to reduce that because they've hired some new policemen. I don't want to get into a whole program here about the police, but everybody's trying to address this police overtime problem. And that's very important to this town, and I'm going to talk about it here for a second. The town manager, Keith J. Robbins, has said all along that he has been trying to protect items pertaining to public safety. That's one thing. People will say, well, if we're not getting the revenue in and the expenses are going up, why don't we just cut out people? Why don't we just cut out services? Well, they're trying to do all that, the 7 selectmen and the town manager, but the town manager is reluctant, and the selectmen, to cut out money for public safety. That's the police, that's the first responders, and that's the a lot about public works too. You know, shoveling snow, putting down salt and sand, all that kind of thing. So anyway, public safety pertains mainly to the police, fire department, and public works, and other first responders. I could spend a whole program on this, and I may do so in the next few weeks. But I want people to understand that the town manager and the selectmen, they just can't go in and keep cutting people and cutting services. There's a balance point somewhere there, and maybe they can do it over the longer run, but it's kind of hard to do over the shorter run. Now, other methods will be explored. Before I say that, I wanted to read this. The town manager stated at the meeting this week, while I was there at the selectmen meeting, and it was re-emphasized by other selectmen, that a supplemental tax bill that you've been reading about in the papers and you've been hearing about on blogs, in the newspapers and elsewhere, a supplemental tax bill will not be necessary to resolve the 2008-2009 budget problems. They will have to look at and use other methods will be explored to resolve any 2008-2009 budget deficit. Now, the town finance director, Henry Centrella, did tell me that it's too late now, anyway, to do that. So we can't have a supplementary tax bill now. Now, some of the things they may want to do here to help, once we know we don't really know yet exactly where we stand. You know, some dust has to settle here. But once we know then they have to look at options. One option might be to borrow some money for a very short period of time. Another option might be to take some of it out of the fund balance. Another option might be to do a little of both. And there may be more options I know nothing about whatsoever, but I'll tell you that the selectmen and the town manager are addressing this problem in one way or another. In another month or two, we'll know, and we'll might even have to go out for approval by the taxpayers. But what they're going to try to do, and I'm pretty sure they'll achieve it, is not have another tax increase, supplemental tax bill come out this year. Now, I want to tell you that most of the towns I look at now in the newspapers, even Torrington I'll use as an example, their fund balance is cut in half over the last 3 years. They had 12 million, and they're estimating now they're going to end up with 6 million because they've been using the money rather than raise taxes. So you can read about that in any newspaper. It's a big subject in the newspapers, and that's happening in other towns, it's happening in other states, and it's happening throughout the country and throughout the world right now. Now, so that pretty well addresses the 2008 budget. Now, people will make political hay out of this because this is a political year. But we got to try to act as businessmen, try to manage the situation. Nobody's got it any easier. You know, some people will probably make some mistakes along the way. But, you know, it'll all resolve itself, and then we'll have to live with it, and we'll have to manage our way through it. That's what has to happen here. Upwards pressure for 2009-2010 budget. That's the one that starts on July 1st. We already got big upwards pressure there. The state has not completed its budget yet. The state has not completed its budget. So the total ramifications of their budget on our town budget has not been determined. Now remember, as I said in the song earlier tonight, there were people who said, well, let's wait for the state to decide. We decided not to do that, and we got our budget passed. 70% of the towns and cities in the state did the same thing we did. Very few, a small percentage, did not do that. So as good businessmen, we went ahead with the budget, and we got the budget approved. We got a standard to work to, a set of objectives to work to, and now we got to handle the exceptions when they come up. And the biggest exception, there are a few exceptions, but the biggest one is going to be when the state decides in a month or two if we get a cut in any of the money we get from the state. Now remember, on this program, since day one, I've been telling you we have a sword of Damocles hanging over our head. And that is the amount of money, $6 to $8 million we get from the state every year. And that's starting to contract. So the state is trying to do a couple things. Some people want to raise taxes. Some people want to do bond issues. There's all kinds of things. But we don't know what they're going to do. And until the dust settles and they make up their mind and it's all, their budget's approved in a few months, then we'll know whether it affects our town or it doesn't. Now, I'll warn you, their budget will affect every taxpayer in Connecticut because they're going to raise up a lot of prices on things, a lot of taxes on small things. But what we're concerned about here is how much are they going to cut from their money they give to us for next year. Now, they have made some decisions at the state level already. And the decisions that they made are known, and the information has already been incorporated into our budget. So we have whatever information we got from the state, where they said, here's the money you're going to get for this or for that, or here's the money we're going to cut for this or for that. We know about, and that's been incorporated not only into the town budget, but into the school budgets as well. So that's very important. So the big issue here is intergovernmental revenue budgets. Until all these settle down, we won't know, and we won't know what the upwards pressures are. And when you don't know, you always assume there will be something. So everybody's concerned about that. Now let's assume we get a big cut from the state. Then we'll have to get around a drawing table and say, how do we handle it? Do we have to cut back resources? Do we have to go out for more taxes? Do we have to do a bond issue? What do we have to do? And I don't know the answer to that. We won't know till we find out if there's any damage. If there's any damage, then we got to figure out what we need to do to fix it. And there's nobody in town now that knows what that's going to be. So if you find somebody that's using that as a political tool, forget it. Nobody knows. We're all waiting with bated breath. Employee contracts. This week at the second meeting, they voted not to approve one contract. I think there are a couple more contracts outstanding that have not yet been approved. And once those employee contracts are finished, they may or may not be an upwards pressure on this next year's budget starting July 1st. We won't know until they're resolved. And I'm sure they've made some assumptions on the outcome of those contracts, but you never know until it's over. And then health care increases. That's always a constant concern when you pay $1.2 million in health care premiums for town, that if they go up in their premiums, then it will affect our town. Now, there are people that are being retiring that'll help a little bit in that area, but we won't know. That's something we have to watch for. It's an unknown here. We do not know how much they may or may not go up. Then there's the next year, which is the 2010 to 11 budget. I've already put this up a few times. This should not be new to you. But I did add in the stimulus package. There is some concern that once people stop getting stimulus money, if it's already built into their budget, then they're going to have to figure out, well, we're not getting that anymore. How do we either get it out of our budget or find other revenue to replace it? That's the big danger, and anybody who's watched my programs over the last year knows that the stimulus package is a double-edged sword. It's like your uncle giving you $1 million to spend, and you spend it on things that you're going to have to keep spending it on next year and the following year, but he doesn't give you $1 million next year or the following year, and you're forced to find that $1 million somewhere else, and usually you can't, so you're in trouble. So that's kind of what's happening there. The state grant, we know we're going to get $190,310 less next year. LoSiP, we're going to have the $200,000 in the budget, and we can get it after the work is done. We can get it replenished eventually with grant money, but the work has to be done first, and we get 100% replenishment. And then we have. Now, this is all linked to road work. I haven't got time to explain it tonight, but if we don't do the road work, then we'll still have the $200,000, and we can do the road work later, and it'll balance on the revenue and expense side. You can see any questions on it. You can see the financial director, the town manager. They'll explain it better than I did here. And then, as far as expenses are concerned, this was $200 on the revenue. Salary increases, and they're assuming 1.5% there. So that could be about a $60,000 hit on our budget. If that happens, if there are no salary increases, then that $60,000 won't be a hit. And then for the medical health costs, they're expecting somewhere between a 5% increase and a 20% increase. That could be between $60,000 upwards pressure and $240,000. And then there are contracts with the employees have to be resolved, as I said earlier, the expense side of those. So the upwards pressure for that year is between $450,310 that we have to find somewhere, and $690,310. So that's a big problem for us as a town. Now, if we remove the LoSiP, it becomes a little easier. It goes between $250,310 and $490,310. So we got a big problem there, and we've got to address that. And I'm sure they're already, looking at ways to get around that problem. But no matter who's in power over the next few years, spending is going to be a very, very big problem, and control of expenses and the accumulation of revenue is going to be a big problem. No miracles are going to happen there. Now, for the good news, Pearson OCR progress, the contract is signed. Work begins on June 25th, 2009, when the building is empty, as they always said in their plan. And they plan substantial completion. They call it substantial completion, not final completion. But the substantial completion date is August 21st, 2009. And if the contractor's not done by then, he gets a fine of $1,000 a day for anyone who doesn't complete their part of the contract. And the latest possible finish date, some people call it a drop-dead date, is October 1st, 2009, if there's a few little items left to be done. Now, as far as the selectmen meeting is concerned, it was purported by the mayor at the selectmen meeting that the sewer map has been approved by P&Z. It's a big step forward. This sewer map was given to P&Z 4 months ago, and remember on my last program I said a letter was written to the selectmen by the sewer and water people saying let's get off here and let's get this thing going and let's get it approved so we can send it off. We, Water and Sewer Commission, can send it off to the state to be included in their POCD. So I don't know what they have to do left, but the next step now is for the Sewer and Water Commission to send the plan to the state for inclusion in their POCD. There may be a little give and take there, but that'll happen sooner rather than later. And that will be a big boon for this town because it means that we will have it in our POCD. But the hard part now is finding someone to come and pay the $4 or $5 million to lay that sewer down to the Torrington, close to the Torrington town line. And it doesn't have to go all at once. Somebody might come. We usually put the burden on the developers to pay for the sewer to their property. There could be exceptions to that. Maybe we can get a grant. I don't know, but that all has to be looked at. So we still got a long way to go here, but we made a major step, and with thanks to both P&Z and the Water and Sewer Commission for getting that stuff put together, and the state for giving them the impetus to do so. The POCD process seems to be gaining momentum, thanks to the new chairman. We've had two chairmen, new chairman this year, and James Roberts is the new chairman, and I watched some of the meetings on TV, and I read the minutes, and you know things seem to be moving now. Things are moving. James is managing by objectives and exception, and he's doing a darn good job from what I could see so far. So my hat's off to him. And it, as was reported at the select meeting, that the town manager has been authorized to sign a contract for the Winchester Land Use and Design Standards with the Department of Environmental Protection. And we'll have that money to spend on some of the things that the DEP wants us to do and to consider doing, and that's $35,000. So that's going to be moving ahead and not costing us any money. So that's great. There is great progress after a long delay on the EDC planning of the downtown district. If you remember, when Bruce Grezik was the town manager, he put a new emphasis on the EDC and the downtown, and they dug up the old 1999 plan that they had for redoing the downtown area, and they put that back on the table, and then they went out and tried to raise some money, and they've got a little bit come from their budget, a little bit is coming from an anonymous donor, and $40,000 or so is going to come from money from the state that Bruce helped to grease the skids for, and the Republicans pushed very strongly. So that's moving. There was a couple articles in the paper about that today, and maybe we can talk a bit more about that on a future program. Now, don't expect a lot of money to come in over the next 10 years from this. This is a 20-year project that will help our town, help attract people to come here as tourists and that kind of thing, or maybe passing way through this gateway to the Berkshires. But as far as a big tax increase, that's unlikely to. So that isn't going to help us too much getting this tax money in. Help us in a lot of other areas. Now, the 2009 local election, I can't spend too much time on this now. I've only got about 10 minutes, but I will spend what I can. It's the first Tuesday in November of 2009, and that is November 3rd. Remember that date, November 3rd. Put it in your calendar. November 3rd is the day you're going to go vote for the new selectmen, the new Board of Education additions, and and some constables. So, and the town clerk. So there are things happening there. Now, citizens that are residents and voters may vote. I went over this with the town hall, so I'm pretty sure it's accurate. There are a total of 7 elected selectmen, and all 7 selectmen seats will be available at the next election. And I want to encourage everybody out there in the town that fits those criteria I put up on the other page to run for office if you can. It doesn't matter what party you are, and if you don't want to join a party, you can run as an individual. There's a little process for that, and if we get time here, I'll talk about it. Otherwise, you contact the town clerk, and she'll tell you about it. So we have 2 people that petitioned, it's called, petitioning. You have to petition to the state and the town and do it by certain dates and following certain paperwork, and we have 2 of those on the Board of Education right now. Each political party may nominate 5 candidates and may win a maximum of 5 of the available 7 seats on the Board of Selectmen, unless some run as petitioners. And if they run as petitioners, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, doesn't matter, or individuals, unaffiliated, whatever, then they can win all 7 seats. So it's very odd, but it's a fact. Once elected, the members of the Board of Selectmen will meet on November 4th, 2009 at 10 a.m. and elect the mayor. Now, there has been a tradition in this town that the highest vote getter is mayor, but that's not what the charter says. The charter says that the selectmen will get together by 10 a.m. on the day after the election, which this year will be November 4th, and they will elect their mayor. There are 9 elected members of the Board of Education. 5 seats are available at the next election. Each political party may nominate 3 candidates and obtain a maximum of 3 seats of the available 5 seats on the Board of Education. No more than 6 members of any party can be seated on the Board of Education, unless they're petitioners, unless some of them are petitioners. Once elected, the members of the Board of Education will elect their own chairman. There is 1 elected town clerk. The town clerk's position will be elected in the next election. The last time it ran unopposed, Sheila Sedlak ran, and the Republicans and Democrats both backed her. Each party can nominate 1 candidate for town clerk. There are 4 elected town constables. Each party may nominate a maximum of 2 candidates and win 2 of the 4 available constable positions. Nominations from the 2 major parties are due between July 21st and July 28th. By July 28th, we'll know who these nominations are from the major parties. If a Democrat or Republican wants to run but is not endorsed by their party, they may force a primary. I'm going a little fast here because we're running out of time. But for the Democrats, this will be by vote of a Democrat open caucus. For the Republicans, this will be by a vote of the Republican Town Committee. Certified nominations are due in the town clerk's office no later than 1 day after the deadline. So the deadline was the 28th for the major parties, and they have to have all their stuff, once they make up their mind within their own parties, by 4 p.m. on July 29th, they better have their information into the town clerk. Otherwise, if they're late, they can be denied. Nominations and state certifications from the 2 minor parties are due by September 2nd. They get much longer time to decide, 2009. New minority parties can be established. Contact the state of Connecticut or the town clerk for details. Individual petitioners may get on the ballot. Anybody in town that's a citizen, an elector, and a resident, they can get on the ballot if they go through a petition and fill out all the paperwork. And petitioners can win all the seats. I mean, it's possible to have no Republicans or no Democrats on the Selectmen or the Board of Education if individual petitioners win all the seats. If they're not allied with a party, there are 2 petitioners are presently on the Board of Education. One of them is the chairperson of the Board of Education. Another one is a member. So contact the state of Connecticut or town clerk for details if you want to do that. And then I put up here, presently, we have 7 selectmen, elected members, 5 are Republican, 2 Democrats, and the Republican is a mayor. Board of Education are 9 elected members, and I'm pretty sure this is right, I'm not positive. 4 Republicans, 2 petitioners, 1 independent, and 2 Democrats. I'm not positive about that, but that's pretty close. If you really want to know the detail, call the town clerk. Petitioner chairman, the chairman of the Board of Education was a petitioner. She dropped out of the party she was in, and she went as a individual, as a petitioner, and she won. Town clerk, his 1 elected position is a Democrat right now. That's Sheila Sedlak. And then the town constables are 4 elected positions. I couldn't get their breakdown for this show, maybe on a different one. Proximate voters, and this is my last slide right now for ending the program. Unaffiliated, roughly 3,700, varies a little, but that's roughly how many Democrats are registered to vote. I'm sorry, unaffiliateds are 3,700. Unaffiliateds, which is a U, they don't belong to either of the other parties. 1,800 Democrats. Republicans are about 1,400. All other parties put together are about 50. So with that, I want to remind you that I'm on every Wednesday night at 7 for the next 11 weeks. Then I'm going to try to get a different time slot or keep the same one or the other. I'm going to try to hang in until the election, and I'm going to try to coach you as much as I can, and then all the rest is up to you, and you will have to live with the result. So if I were you, I'd pay particular attention because it affects you, your grandparents, your parents, your children, and perhaps their children. So pay attention, watch all the other shows too, get a balanced view of everything, and then vote your conscience. Thank you very much.